Hello and welcome on our special edition on CBC TV. I am Anastasia Lavrina. We'll continue talking about Armenia-Azerbaijan Nagorno-Karabakh conflict with our special guest, Damjan Krnjevic-Miskovic, who is a Director of Policy Research and Publications of Ada University. Good evening and welcome to our special edition.
Good evening. It's good to be with you.
Thanks a lot. And for the beginning, I would like to talk a bit more about the article you published recently. Just to remind to our viewers, the name was "Armenia needs to sue for peace now. The alternative is even worse." We would like for the beginning to learn more about the key points of this article, shortly if you can present it, and overall your opinion about what's happening now, because since the time of escalation, this conflict, Azerbaijan is ready for peaceful resolution of the conflict, but we don't see the constructive approach of Armenia to possible peaceful resolution of this conflict. How you can comment on this?
Well, look, I think the basic point is this. When you have changing geopolitical circumstances and you have battlefield results that are what they are, then, you know, opting to go towards a negotiated solution or enter into serious negotiations is obviously a more prudent approach if you're Armenia than to continue pursuing the course of action that they're pursuing now. You know, that put together with the international law arguments and so on that presumably your viewers are familiar with, it's becoming more and more difficult for Armenia to sustain its present course of action. There's something that I didn't mention in the article, but it occurred to me more recently. In the early 1980s, there was an intelligence assessment made by the Israelis about a leader in the region. And they characterized him in this way, and I think it actually applies very well to the situation in which Pashinyan finds himself now. Think of a person on a bridge with both sides collapsing and alligators in the river. You can't go forward, you can't go back, and you can't jump into the river. And so this is really, you know, it's a wonderful illustration of the situation that the Armenian civilian leadership finds itself in.
But in any case, we have to find the solution. And if there is no way forward, there is no way back, then Armenia has to think more precisely on what kind of future they need to have, they want to have.
I think one of the issues that the Armenians have to deal with is whether or not they want to choose to live side by side with Azerbaijanis. And unfortunately, the Armenian record in the occupied territories is that they don't want to do that. And that's astounding to me. It's, you know, Armenia is one of the most ethnically homogeneous states in the world. And that's a result of ethnic cleansing. And it seems to me that they have a fear that if they come to some sort of an agreement that returns all of the territories as it should to Azerbaijan, that somehow Azerbaijan will exact retribution based on what they did to the Azerbaijani population in their lands and in the occupied territories. And I think that's just wrong.
Indeed.
I don't see any evidence that Azerbaijan would even consider doing something like that. In fact, it seems to me that Azerbaijan has made it plain, both privately and publicly, that they will bend over backwards to try to find ways to accommodate the Armenian population that chooses to stay in the territories that we're talking about.
Yes, indeed. And now when today we hear the words of the Armenian side when they are saying about so-called genocide against the Armenian population who are living in Nagorno-Karabakh, it seems very strange for me, because it's them, it's an Armenia who actually forcibly displaced Azerbaijanis from Armenia who used to live there during the Soviet time. And then after they started its cleansing policy against Azerbaijanis on the occupied territories in the beginning of 19th. So it's really strange to hear such kind of opinion from the Armenian government. I also would like to bring to the attention of our viewers one of the points which you mentioned in your article. The Armenian irredentist claim to Nagorno-Karabakh is based on false equating self-determination with an rights of recession and occupation. But for today, they are saying that this war it's more to protect the rights of those people who live on the occupied Azerbaijani territories. But it seems again very strange for me, and they again come to the point of self-determination. But from the judicial point of view, from the point of international law, it's actually fake. How you can tell more about this part of your article to our viewers?
Well, look, if you equate self-determination with, the quest for independence, then the entire international system disappears, right? Because the fundamental tenet of the international system, any international system, is sovereignty. And self-determination is fine in terms of self-government and all these other sorts of things, autonomy, whatever. But if you equate self-determination with independence, then that's it. Then self-determination has equal standing in international law as does sovereignty, which makes zero sense. And so the second you equate self-determination with independence, then you're basically saying you refuse to accept the basic tenets of the international system.
Yeah, very interesting point. You also mentioned another quite interesting, which attracted my attention. You used to speak about three basic ways to counter this subordination: by treaty, by decision of the Security Council, or by force, what is happening actually today. And already I guess there is no single person who thinks that OSCE Minsk group was efficient, was effective, because 30 years passed and during this period of time there were no significant achievements, and even if there were any kind of agreements or the documents, which is also declared in the OSCE Minsk Group Secretariat in Vienna, Armenia started to deny the existence of any kind of documents, Madrid Principles, Kazan's Formula, and etc., because they, in my opinion, they were not interested in the conflict resolution, but they were keen to support this occupational policy, the conflict to be frozen, and etc., so this occupation can last forever, as they were planned to do. But in your opinion, if there is still any possibility to solve this conflict by peace, or the force is the only chance, considering the constructive position of the Armenian leadership?
Well, look, just to come back to the basic point of my article, right? The basic point of what I wrote, and I believe this wholeheartedly, is that Armenia can expect to extract more concessions from Azerbaijan at the negotiating table than on the battlefield. And so sooner or later, they're going to have to realize this. I think actually the civilian leadership and the military leadership of Armenia is completely aware of this. But I think also that there's a very serious danger that the civilian leadership is willing to let the military option play itself out so that they can blame the military and not take responsibility for the obviously difficult decisions and compromises that they will need to make in order for the peace to hold. And that's, I understand that some politicians think this way, but it's certainly not in the national interest of Armenia, and it's definitely not in the interest of the civilians who are living in the territories at issue.
Do you think the position of the official Yerevan can be changed after the complete liberation of Azerbaijani territories?
Well, if you have complete liberation of the territories, then at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what Armenia's position is.
Because still, even after the complete liberation, if there is no any constructive position of the official Yerevan, who will still deny that these territories belong to Azerbaijan, we should expect more provocative actions of Armenia against Azerbaijan even after. That's why I'm asking.
Well, that's possible, but I think that at that point it would be very difficult for them to even retain nominal support from places like Moscow. And even from their friends in the West, because then it becomes, if they choose to go the military route that results in a complete loss on the battlefield, and then continue to have these sort of aggressive policies that continue to claim the territory of another sovereign state without controlling that territory, which, as you know, is the case to some extent now, then it's going to be very difficult to expect that they will have recourse to any kind of support. And an Armenia without even nominal support of anyone is an Armenia that really, it's hard to imagine that it would pose a credible threat to Azerbaijan.
The absence of this even nominal support, as you mentioned, do you think this is a result of very wrong position of the Armenian government and the policy direction which they selected? Because now we see that almost all international community, international structures and the countries, despite the fact that all of them are called for peaceful resolution of the conflict, they call for both sides to sit and think about the negotiations and peaceful resolution of the conflict. Still, they all support the territorial integrity of Azerbaijan, and some of them even openly, I mean now Turkey, I mean Pakistan, Ukraine, all of these governments are openly support the position of Azerbaijan and its rightful direction to liberate all the occupied territories, because there is nothing has been done from the international community to make this peaceful process to be implemented. How do you think? Why Armenia, I can say, even lost within the international community?
Well, I think part of it has to do with the fact that their position is basically untenable. On the one hand, there were parts of the international community, as you call it, that were willing to tolerate the status quo for a number of reasons, some of which had to do with Armenia, some of which had to do with the fact that they didn't care enough one way or the other. But when the status quo ended up changing as a result of the counteroffensive, especially in the context of one of the major powers in the region, namely Turkey, that was very clear and explicit in its support for Azerbaijan, I think that it made it much more difficult for countries that were sort of on the fence or that had some sympathy toward Armenia or whatever to back that up with significant enough support to help in the Armenian cause. And so I think it really is sort of geopolitical malpractice if you think about it. Circumstances changed. The active support that Turkey gave to Azerbaijan, which increased recently, or relatively recently, and culminated in a series of military exercises and all sorts of other things in the summer, to expect that somehow this meant that the status quo, which obviously favored Armenia, would somehow remain tenable is astounding. And clearly the authorities in Moscow saw the way the wind was blowing and recalculated their approach to the region, made that recalculation reasonably explicit both in July by rejecting the CSTO in treaty, and then again a few months later, again in the context of the CSTO, and the fact that the Armenians didn't get the message or pretended not to get the message, but somehow thought that everything would still be okay, and that their friends or their supposed friends would come to their rescue.
This is very interesting because Moscow, Russian Federation, keeps a very neutral position. Since the beginning, the president of Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, said that Russia is not going to support any separate countries in this conflict escalation. And definitely there is no any reason for a security treaty organization to intervene in this conflict, because the military operation is going not on the Armenian territory but on the Azerbaijani occupied territories. That's why the Moscow's position is quite clear. But the Armenian side does not stop to blame Russia for its, I will say, very wrong position, as they usually say, and that's why there some even strikes appear in Moscow, and in Moscow even it happens in Armenia, in Yerevan, and even in France it took place some days ago when they even buried the flags of Russia, saying that it's not right and Russia has to support us. Russia is obliged to support, and if there is no any support, then Armenia can change its foreign policy direction, not in favor of Russia. How do you think, if there is any possibility, if Russian Federation can be involved in this conflict, if Armenia continues its provocative actions. Because I can also add to my previous state, now today we saw that Armenia is trying to expand the scope of the conflict and move it to the official borders between Armenia and Azerbaijan. So to provoke Azerbaijan to send the missile strike back to Armenian territory, and then after they can blame Azerbaijan for this and ask and request from Russian Federation to be involved. Do you think that there is such kind of possibility, or till the end Russia will not follow any kind of provocative actions from the Armenian side?
Well, look, I don't think that there's any country on earth that can provoke Russia into entering into a military situation. If Russia wants to engage somewhere militarily, and if it's logistically possible, then it will. So far, it's been clear that they're not interested in doing that. They've made that very clear to the Armenians. They've made it very clear publicly. It would be very difficult to imagine that all of a sudden some magical event caused by an Armenian action would, or by Armenian pressure, even worse, would somehow, change Moscow's mind. I think there are some things that may get the Russians to pay a little more attention. If, for instance, the zone of conflict expands, goes into actually in a serious way, starts impacting on the state border between Armenia and Azerbaijan, there, it might at least involve significant diplomacy to try to ensure that doesn't continue. Because at the end of the day, I think the Russians are genuinely not interested in participating in a military sense in this conflict. There are a lot of reasons for this, but one of them is obviously the fact that they're overextended. The Russians continue to be involved in the Syrian theater. They continue to be paying close attention to Libya. There are other parts of sort of other Russian neighbors that are in need of Moscow's attention, in the way that Moscow understands its regional policy, from Belarus to East Ukraine to Kyrgyzstan. This is not a good time for Moscow to further extend its sort of active areas of engagement. Let's put it that way.
Well, let's hope that it will be like this, and Azerbaijan and Armenia will be able to resolve this conflict as soon as possible. We hope that Armenia will change its minds and will try to be involved in the conflict to be resolved by peaceful means. Thank you very much for this interview and for these comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You watch special edition on CBC TV. We discuss the last events around Armenia-Azerbaijan Nagorno-Karabakh conflict with our special guest, Damjan Krnjevic-Miskovic, Director of Policy Research and Publications of ADA University in Azerbaijan. See you in the next edition.